you need a variety. As a farmer, you need to work with a variety that will shine in the cup.
Yeah.
And so now I started trying to find out which varieties shine in the cup, and Gesha came to the list of some of the coffees that shine in the cup.
Sure, absolutely. Hi everyone, welcome to Coffee with April. My name is Patrick Rolfe. As you can see, it's a little bit of a different setting than what we're used to because we're in Kenya. And I'm in Kenya visiting several different single estates, farmers and producers, wanting to learn more about that kind of aspects of farming. And I've been fortunate enough to spend a little bit of time with Peter here. Over the last few days. Do you want to just make a short introduction of yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, as Patrick put it, my name's John Peter Mbature, and our farm is Kamavindi Coffee, Kamavindi Estate. We're in Embu. Embu is north of Nairobi city, so just on the slopes of Mount Kenya, just behind us.
Which is really beautiful, right? Yeah, it's really, so I've been around for a few days, and last time I went to Kenya, I was also in this region, right? Yeah. And one of the things that is very interesting with Peter here as well, apart from the fact that he has an amazing farm that we're going to show you and give you a bit more insight to, is that you also spend a lot of time helping and educating other producers, right?
Yeah. I do work with other farmers, both cooperative societies and estate farmers. And so in Kenya, when we talk about estate farmers, we're talking about like farmers who have washing stations at their own farm. So I do work with farmers who own the washing stations and the cooperative societies, where like the smallholder farmers deliver their cherries and have the cherries packed in the same location.
Yeah. There's many layers of Kenyan coffee, right? Like when we know it's a bit complicated. This time we also have a few changes politically that is making it more challenging. And we're gonna, in this video, we wanna like, first of all, show you a little bit around the farm and explain a few things. We have a few different interesting varietals. Yeah. You're one of the first to have Gesha around as well, which is also quite interesting. But you know, what is actually the difference between SL and Ruiru 11 and so on, and the other varietals. And we're going to try to kind of just walk you through and also talk about the different kind of challenges that we see in Kenyan coffee, right? So I think the first step we're going to do is we're going to take you to a slightly different part of the farm, and we'll talk a little bit about the SL and the Ruiru as well, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, super.
Sure.
So basically for those of you that don't know, right? So we have, let's say SL and Ruiru are the two main varietals in Kenya at the moment. That's fair to say, right? Yeah. And then basically we have SL here, and we have Ruiru here, right? Yeah. Do you want to walk us through a little bit the differences of the two?
The differences of the two is when you look at the tree morphologically, like the morphology, the structure of the tree, how the branches are structured. This one is compact. So you have the branches coming in very close to each other. And then you have also the internode. So from one node there, and the next, the spaces, they're also like close to each other. Yeah. So it's more of a compact variety, and it's resistant to CBD and leaf rust. So that's the Ruiru 11.
Could you tell us quickly, because when you've been traveling around Kenya, one of the things we hear the most from the producers is CBD is a big issue, right? Do you want to explain what CBD is?
Yeah, so CBD is actually coffee berry disease, and it's an infection caused by a fungus, and it causes the cherries to fall off the tree. So it just takes a day. Like a day when you're not in the farm, and the next time you're coming, you shake the tree like this, and the cherries are falling off. Yeah. Like you can lose up to 100% of the crop to CBD. The other part of CBD is when the cherries are mature. So instead of ripening, they just turn black.
Sure. Which we've seen we're actually seeing quite a lot this trip.
We've seen, and we'll also see at the farm. So because it's difficult to control it 100%. So we'll see parts of we're still here at the farm.
Yeah,
we'll see sections where we've had CBD.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And so it's basically a widespread issue. And I think from my understanding on this trip, we see basically in the late 90s is when a lot of farmers started to plant the Ruiru 11 instead.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So the Ruiru 11 variety was released in the late 80s. So it came in more in the late 90s. That's when we had more and more farmers shifting to Ruiru 11. Recently, they've had another resistant variety that they're calling it Batian.
Yeah.
So it's still there, not as
much
as the Ruiru 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what would you say before moving over to the SL? What are the main flavor characteristics of the Ruiru?
So for me, with the Ruiru 11, so if it's processed right. So one thing with the Ruiru 11, you need to start with the picking and ensure that we pick it ripe. And the ripeness for Ruiru is not the same red ripe for the SL.
No, which was something Peter told me yesterday actually, yeah. And that it clicked in my head, because one of the things that I feel is that Kenyan coffee isn't quite tasting as we used to, right?
Yeah.
Historically.
Yeah.
And a big part of that, I'm sure now, is the fact that, because when we pick here in Kenya, we pick on visuals.
Yeah.
We look at the cherry.
Yeah.
So they look at an SL cherry, they look at a Ruiru cherry.
Yeah.
When it looks the way it should, they pick it.
They pick it.
But as you say, the ripeness of the Ruiru is very different
from the ripeness
of the SL.
Of the SL.
Visually, right?
Visually,
so if you pick the cherries looking the same, you end up with underripe Ruiru.
Yeah. So if we're going to pick Ruiru as a deep red, close to like purple, very, very deep red, and then process it right, have slightly longer fermentation hours as compared to the SL. I've seen Ruiru 11 getting like notes of deep citrus. So you end up with a cup that can go as high as like an 88, 89 point through the SCA system, and just like deeply citrus. You take it, you feel like you're taking like lime or orange juice. So yeah, so Ruiru 11 also has some really good potential.
Sure.
In the cup. It just depends on how the coffee was processed.
Yeah.
And now, when we talk about processing, we're starting from harvesting, like the picking, the level of ripeness.
Which is so important, right? And one of the things in Kenya here as well, which differs a lot from what I see in other production countries, is that here we don't measure Brix content, we don't look at sugars. Like it's a less technical version of farming.
Yeah.
Which then of course makes it difficult when you have different varietals, right?
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about the SL. So for me, the SL is really where the quality is, right? That's where you find the best cups up until now, right? And
so
what's the challenges and the opportunities, and clearly visually a very different tree.
They're totally different trees. So one of the characteristics of the SL is that it's generally a bigger tree.
Yeah.
You can see the spaces, we call it like the space between the nodes. It's a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So looking at this, from this part to this to the next, from one node to the next, on the SL it's slightly longer, and the same thing with the branches. So they are also quite spaced from one branch to the next. Those are kind of like the two main differences.
Sure.
Going to the tip of the tree. So the tip is, I don't really look at the tip of the color of the tip as a major attribute that you use to differentiate the varieties.
Sure.
Because sometimes you have the bronze and the green. I realized any variety can end up having like the dark bronze and the green. So, but generally the SL28 has more of like a green tip.
Yeah.
And the SL34 has a bronze tip. So that's more like a general
That's
way.
the main difference, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And what do you find cup quality when it comes to SL28?
The SL28 is one of the biggest difference between now the SL28 and the Ruiru 11. I would, if I was to compare the two, for me, the Ruiru 11 kind of shouts the citrus flavors, but then it doesn't have like something else going on with
It's
it
not as complex
in the cup. But then with the SLs, it's complex. So at some point you take in, you feel the citrus, you feel the berries, you taste the like wines. You feel like you're taking wine, and then at some point, as the coffee cools, it comes to chocolate. You feel like you're actually not sure it's coffee you're taking. Like feels, it moves, and you have to like even ask yourself, is it coffee or is it chocolate?
Sure, yeah.
And so that's the complexity of the SL28.
Yeah. Well, what would you say? I heard a lot of producers this trip, they say the Ruiru is easier to farm.
Yeah.
That's
Ruiru
why
11.
we want to farm it, right?
Yeah.
Do you have the same experience?
Yeah, Ruiru 11 is easier to farm. I would say it's easier to farm because whenever you see a flower, that's a cherry you're going to harvest. Worst case scenario would be like a berry borer or just damage from the pest. So the only challenge is pest control.
Yeah.
I'm also realizing that, like having these two trees alongside each other, like this Ruiru 11 and the SL, you find more production on the Ruiru 11
for sure, yeah.
as opposed to the SL.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing even at the flowering level. So I kind of feel that the Ruiru 11 is adapting better to climate change than the SL. Yeah. So overall, Ruiru 11 is looking, it is an easier variety to handle because you don't have like so many challenges as opposed to the SL. Yeah.
Would it be fair to say from your perspective that the future of Kenyan coffee most likely will be Ruiru?
Yeah, the future of Kenyan coffee, I see it moving more into the Ruiru and Batian.
Yeah.
And the new establishments are like the new areas, because we right now we are around the Mount Kenya region.
Yeah.
So we're having new areas getting into production. The Rift Valley region, that's up to going towards Mount Elgon region.
Which would be the west part.
That's the west part of the country. 90% of the new establishment and like new coffee that is being planted is Batian, the Batian variety. So very soon you're going to see more of the Ruiru 11 and Batian coming to
and less of the SL.
And less of SL. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's really interesting, right? And I think we're also like, I think now we're going to move ahead and we're going to try to look at some Gesha as well, right?
Yeah, sure.
Because I think that would be super interesting.
Yeah. Cool.
Gesha trees.
Yeah.
Which is really exciting, right?
Yeah.
Gesha that's already been in Kenya, planted here. Very important, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about why you have Gesha.
The reasons why I had the Gesha was this desire to experiment with a different variety. So when I first got into coffee, I remember trying to find a variety that would be a best fit for me as a farmer. And my idea of the best fit variety was actually Batian. But then I started talking to more and more buyers, and I realized, you need a variety as a farmer. You need to work with a variety that will shine in the cup.
Yeah.
And so now I started trying to find out which varieties shine in the cup, and Gesha came to the list of some of the coffees that shine in the cup.
Sure, absolutely.
So
and I think that's something that I've seen a lot, and we work a lot with it at April as well. A lot of different Geshas, right? Gesha is interesting because it's, good Gesha is not everywhere. Good Gesha still requires the correct conditions and handling, right? And I think everyone has been looking at Kenya for a long time, and kind of wondered, where is the Gesha?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's very exciting to be here and basically see, how many trees do you have today?
We got around 300 trees.
300 trees of Gesha, yeah.
100 trees of the Gesha. So it was more of an experimental plot.
Yeah.
And right now we're thinking of moving or making it commercial.
Yeah. And let's just for like the people watching it that maybe don't know, if you have 300 trees of something,
yeah,
how many kilos of green coffee, of like high quality green coffee, do you get out of 300 trees? So as you can see, we're basically now, we moved over to the mill. We had some technical difficulties. We were filming down at the Gesha. It was getting a bit too dark, so we decided to kind of pick it up today, right? So what we were talking about then was how many trees or how much coffee does actual 100 trees provide, right? Because I think there's a lot of people that don't quite understand, right? You get about 150 exportable, good quality coffee from 100 trees, right?
From the 100 trees, yes.
Which is quite crazy, right?
Yeah.
And here we already kind of established that Peter he's sitting on some of the best raw material in Kenya, right? Or like some very good cherries, right? And then the next step, as we said, it's going to be the processing, right? Because I think we've seen a lot in Kenya where the raw material, the cherries, the trees, the farms are actually really well done.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always translate to the processing, right? And that comes down to something you mentioned earlier as well, which the fact that we're picking different varietals.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then surely different varietals also maybe needs to be processed a little bit differently.
A little bit different because they're all different. So we will need to be treating them. We need to give them different treatment when it comes to the processing.
Yeah. Do you want to walk us through how the kind of general processing step from a washing perspective works here at the farm?
Yeah.
So let's say the cherry, they're picked.
Yes.
What's the next step and how does that work?
So the standard Kenyan style of processing coffee, it's the traditional washed. You'll find people calling it like the double fermentation system. So coffee comes in, we do the hand sorting. We also select the underripe cherries, the unripe, the sticks, the leaves, just clean the coffee once again, and then weigh the coffee. So you get the weight that we are pulping for that day, just for to just get for the record purposes. No, this is what we harvested for that day. These are our cost for this number of kilos. So we take the weight, and then we put the coffee in the cherry hopper. So we see the hopper. So once the coffee gets into the cherry hopper, before we put the coffee in the cherry hopper, we put the coffee in water.
Sure.
To float, we put them in water, and the overripes, insect damaged beans, and just defective beans float.
What's going to go up?
So we skim that, and then what is left down is what we put in the cherry hopper. And then the pulping, we run the pulping. Our pulper is a 2-disc. Pulper is just a grader and a repasser. So the coffee goes through the pulp and then to the fermentation. So we have an initial 20-hour fermentation where we do a light wash and then move the coffee to the second level. As you can see, the fermentation tanks are like 2 levels. We have the upper level and the lower level. So we move the coffee from the upper level to the lower level and hold the coffee for another 20 hours. And then we get the coffee out to the grading channel, wash and grade the coffees, put the coffees to the tables now out to dry. Okay, and when you do let's say the first and second wash in the 2 different stages, do you use new water in the second stage or the same water as from the first stage? So it's all like dry fermentation. So in the first stage, we're holding coffee for the 20 hours, and in between, we like turn the coffees inside the fermentation tank. Because over time we've realized that there are hard pans that form inside the fermentation. And so with the hard pans forming, mucilage, the mucilage that's breaking down cannot drain out of the fermentation tank. And so it gets trapped somewhere, leading to like an inconsistency in the fermentation.
Sure.
So we turn the coffees to just break the hard pans that are forming. And when the hard pans form, they also generate heat.
Yeah.
So you have more areas within the fermentation where you have like lots of heat.
Sure.
So
and that gives you an inconsistent quality.
It gives a lot of inconsistency in the cup, especially the fruit flavor. So you might end up being advised to cut down on your fermentation hours because you had like an over-fermented cup, like an over-ferment flavor in some of the cups, but it's not actually the number of hours. It's that just some pockets were fermenting under higher temperatures.
So basically a very small part of the total lot.
Yeah.
You can judge a coffee just based on that, right?
On that.
And then you end up doing maybe changing the wrong thing, right?
Changing the wrong thing. So we advise like you turn the coffees in between the fermentation. I give it for us, we turn the coffees around 14 to 16 hours after pulping.
Yeah, okay.
So it's still dry.
Yeah.
You're not bringing in like fresh water, clean water. You're not adding the clean water. So after the 20 hours, that's when you now clean the coffee.
You clean the coffee.
And the water that we used to clean, you just let it go.
Yeah, sure.
Into like the pit and so that's wastewater.
Yeah.
So then we hold the coffee further.
Yeah.
Now we pass the coffee to the second level of fermentation and hold it dry. It's still dry fermentation.
Completely dry, okay. Sure.
Yeah. And then in the second level, we keep now monitoring the coffees.
Yeah.
And the point where you're getting the coffee out for washing will depend on the scents that you're picking from the coffee.
Because I've seen you done that throughout this trip several times where Peter would actually go and like pick up the coffee and just actually smell the coffee.
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
You said something interesting the other day where if you have a healthy fermentation, you have bees. If you have a bad fermentation, you have flies.
You see the flies coming in.
Sure.
So now in the second phase, you as a farmer or as the person managing the processing, you really need to monitor the coffee.
Yeah.
And so when you see flies coming in, it tells you like there's off smells coming from there.
Yeah.
And the off smells generally end up in the cup. And if there's like the fermentation is progressing on well, you see bees coming in, and it leads to like cleaner flavors in the cup. So that's just an indication that hey, something is working or something is not working. In the second level, from some of the articles I've read, they've talked about organic acids forming in the fermentation. And the organic acid, they talk about the citric, the phosphoric acid, acetic acid. Actually, acetic acid, you can smell the acetic acid in the second fermentation, in the second level. And so they're volatile, and the organic acids that are forming are quite volatile. And in my experience, I would say that's what stains the cup.
Yeah.
So the point, the flavors we're getting from the fermentation will end up being picked in the final in the cup. So when you're getting now the coffee out for washing, you should try and memorize this is the point I get the coffee out. This is the percentage of the acetic, the citric, and then that helps a lot in terms of getting a uniform cup in the end.
Yeah. And what makes this so difficult is that it's not just because of different varietals, but because of temperatures in general, right?
Yeah.
There's no like textbook way to do this for all coffees, right?
Yeah.
Like one lot can be X amount of hours, another lot can be another amount of hours.
Yeah.
And it's really about always just staying on top of that and checking as much as you can.
And
right?
checking as much as you can throughout the second phase of the fermentation.
How usual would you say that is? Like if you look at Kenyan farming in general, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that most producers are aware of this and they would check for it? Or would you say that most producers would look at a kind of a very general approach?
So it's kind of a method I've developed through, I always say I'm the lucky farmer. So being able to cap coffee and then relate what I picked from the fermentation and the cap. So that has helped me. So it's not like something the ordinary or the regular farmer does in Kenya.
No, because most farmers would not be cupping and tasting their own
They
coffees.
not be cupping and tasting their own coffees. And then the books that we have, they tell us, you just wash the coffee and wash and grate the coffee when you can feel the grit. So the material and the training that is available just talks about mucilage removal. Yeah. Not more about sensory experience and trying to improve the cup at the fermentation.
Yeah, and that is one of the biggest challenges in Kenyan coffee, and I think that's why producers like you are so relevant for Kenya.
Yeah.
Because you're able to taste and then connect the dots, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is very interesting.
Yeah.
We're gonna move ahead and take a look at the kind of final step at the farm, which would be the drying.
The
right?
drying, yes.
Let's go over and have a look.
Okay.
So we've been through a little bit about, well, we talked about the cherries, the varietals.
Yeah.
We talked about the processing and the challenges that comes there.
Yeah.
Final step for you here is going to be drying coffee.
Now the drying.
Yeah, and that's quite difficult.
Yeah. It's also really critical for the farmer to know how to ensure that the coffee dries in the right way. So the first steps are not to dry the coffees like really fast. Control the temperatures, control the humidity, ensure that the coffees are not re-wetted, like they don't get wet again.
Yeah.
Once the bean leaves the water and starts drying, it's not drying too fast, it's not drying too slow, and it's not getting water again, either directly from rain or gaining moisture from the environment.
Yeah.
So,
what would you say is the average kind of optimal drying time? Obviously, that would be a range, but do you dry for 10 days, for 5 days, for 15 days?
Yeah, previously we've been drying our coffees for 14 to 18 days in total. The washed coffees. It took us 14 to 18 days. But now with the changing weather, we've realized it's been a challenge. It's becoming a challenge to dry the coffee out in the sun. Yeah, and that's why
which is why we're standing in here.
We are standing now inside the dehydrator. We're calling the coffee dehydrator. We'd love to call it a coffee dehydrator, not more of a solar dryer. Yeah. So, we are shifting from drying the coffees out, out in like under the sun, like direct sun, into the dehydrator. One, because the weather is becoming too unpredictable. Yeah. So the rainfall season is like getting compressed with climate change. And so previously we would have rain running for like 2 months, but now it's running for like a month. Yeah. And so within that 1 month, it becomes really difficult to dry the coffee because it's raining almost all the time. So that's why we're now shifting to the coffee dehydrator. We're calling it the dehydrator because we want to control the temperatures, the humidity, and not to dry the coffees above 24 degrees Celsius. So we're still working on the setup As you have seen, we have a digital control, or digital temperature control system. And so we're still working on it to ensure that the temperatures inside don't go above 25 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So basically what you're looking at is a climatized room, more or less, right?
Yeah.
Which is going to allow Peter to dry the coffee a lot more consistently,
Yeah.
a bit regardless of the weather outside,
Yeah.
right? Because we hear this a lot when we travel around the world as well, like climate change and rain.
Yeah.
It is changing.
Yeah.
It is a massive factor.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when it comes to this final step, that both the raw material and the processing, even if that's done perfectly, you can still screw it up here. It can still go very wrong. Right? And then that's such a big difference in terms of what you get out of the labor that you put in, right?
That you put in, yes. So one of the biggest, I would say the biggest challenges with drying is if it rains, sometimes it rains continually for a week and you're harvesting coffee. So it creates first a backlog on the drying table. So you don't have drying tables available. So all the drying tables are filled. You have coffee that is ripe.
And you have more coming.
And you have just more coming. You have to pick, you have to pulp, and you don't have somewhere to store it. So you have farmers soaking that coffee underwater for up to even 3 days. That for me, water is a solvent. And so it ends up extracting from the beans.
A lot of the good stuff.
A lot of the good stuff, quality comes down. Sometimes you end up holding the coffee too wet for too long, and then chances of mold getting in are really high, especially in the initial stages of drying. And if we get mold, you end up with now the phenolic flavors in the cup, then defect which definitely get the coffees out of specialty.
And lower price, lower everything, right?
Lower price,
I think that one of the hardest part, and it's a lot of people that don't understand this, but once you start harvesting, there's no stopping.
There's no stopping.
And there's just more coffee coming. And if your weather is terrible, it's raining all the time, it doesn't matter. You have to deal with the coffee that is coming, right?
Sure.
Which is why setups like this are so important. And it's going to help you really improve that
improve the drying.
I think one of the last things I want to ask you before we kind of round up is, what's the future of Kenyan coffee, right? And what's the future for your farm as well, of course? Like what do you see as the most important next steps to take to make sure that Kenya kind of comes back to producing some of the best coffee in the world? Because we know in the past that's how it's been.
So I've been questioning myself over recently, because yes, I do agree with you. Kenyan production was really high. Kamavindi as a farm was producing way like double of what we're doing now back in the day. And now as the third generation farmer, I'm asking myself what was it that people back then were doing that we are not doing, or is it an issue with climate change? Is it an issue with the soils? So we're trying to set ourselves to be more adapted to the issues that are coming along, to see and try to get back to where we were in terms of production. I would say in terms of quality, we've improved as a farm. But in terms of productivity, we need to get back up there. As an industry, still as a farm, we are also trying to figure out like what needs to change. Especially with how we handle the SL28. We are 80% SL. We don't want to walk away from the SL. We still feel that that's where the potential is in terms of excellent cups or excellent cup quality. Yes, we're experimenting with the Gesha and everything, but Gesha is nice, but it's not typically like this sorts Kenya-like coffee. So we still would love to continue producing the coffees that are, I would say, authentically Kenyan. What was produced back in the day, we still would love to run the experiments there with the Gesha, different processes, the naturals, honeys, and everything, just to also move with the tide, because specialty is changing. Yeah. So we still be doing that, but we want to still stick to the SLs. So we, as a farm, we are trying to see what it is we can change in how we do, especially the agronomy part, to bring back the volumes with the SLs. As an industry, I feel farmers are really frustrated by first how the SL28 is coping with climate change and disease resistance. It's not as resistant as it was back in the day, or it's just the fungus is also mutating. We can't tell what it is. So I feel we might end up seeing more of the resistant varieties being planted, especially from the higher regions, higher elevation zones. So I feel, generally the crop quality of what is authentically Kenyan might change with time, especially that we're shifting into the hybrids and to the different varieties. I feel the zones are also, like we have new zones coming up, also wanting to grow the SL. And having tasted coffees from different parts of the country, the different regions, it's tastes different. So I see like Western Kenya really coming up with Western Kenya and the Rift Valley coming up with volumes, really good volumes that will have an impact in the final average, like flavor, like the expectation from Kenya.
That's really interesting, right? And I think I, for one, has kind of followed the progress of both what you're up to, of course, but like also overall in Kenya, because I think there's so many people out there that really loves Kenyan coffee and wants to see Kenyan coffee to kind of not just get back to where it was, but maybe then turn into something different and better, right? Because I see so much potential in it. So thank you for taking the time, Peter. It's been super nice, and he's been basically hosting us the whole week, which it's been really great, and it's been very eye-opening for me as well, to have a very kind of modern and progressive perspective on Kenyan coffee, which I really appreciate, and I'm looking forward to be back in February and taste your coffees as well. So thank you again, and thank you for all of you watching as well.
We really also as a family, because Kamavindi is family run. As a family, we really appreciate your time with us and the information, because we keep learning. We also learned. I also learned a lot from you, and being the person on the ground, then it translates as valuable information for the farm, and really appreciative of that, Patrick.
It's a pure pleasure, and we're super excited to see what will come out of it.
Thank you.
We want to give a special thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. It's because of you that we are able to continue to make these videos. And we want you all to feel free to always come with suggestions and ideas on the content that you want to see, because we are doing this for you and because of you. Thank you from all of us here at April.